Hey everybody, this is Joseph, and this week we're going to talk about making stocks. Stocks are essential to making soups and sauces when you're making dinner or entertaining. And I think that a lot of people have gotten into such a rut of just depending upon going to the grocery store to get a pre-made box of chicken stock or beef stock. And while that is convenient, it's really not a great quality, and it really isn't what a true stock should look or taste like. And when you're cooking, those store-bought stocks really do impart an unusual flavor to your food that you don't realize unless you're used to having homemade stocks. And one of the great premises about making stocks is that it's an opportunity for you to use leftovers during your week of cooking, so that you're not wasting any of your produce or market items as you're making dinners. So typically, when I'm cooking, I will save a bowl or a Ziploc bag of scraps, parsley trimmings, the bottoms of celery, trimmings from onions, even the scrapings from carrots. All of this stuff can be saved to use when making a stock. And today we're going to go over the process for making a beef stock, a traditional chicken stock, and also a vegetable stock. The ingredients that are needed in making a stock are your basic mirepoix, which is onions, carrots, and celery. I also use shallots in mine. For the vegetable stock, you're going to want to have some mushrooms in that. The mushroom is going to impart a really warm, earthy flavor to your vegetable stock. Leeks or leek trimmings are great to add to a stock. Garlic, also the skins and the bottoms of garlic is great to add. When you're making stock, you want to use the skin and everything for the stock. So you don't want to throw away any of this stuff. It's about using all the scraps, and the skins are going to add a great color and a little bit more flavor to your stocks as well. Fresh thyme, some bay leaves. For the beef stock, you're going to want to have some tomato paste, which we're going to roast on the bones. You're going to have marrow bones for the beef stock. A marrow bone can be found in your grocery store. These are usually found frozen in the freezer section, and they come in packs. So the butcher, when he gets the meat, just cuts the bones up and packages them. And for $6 or $7, you get a package of bones. And you want to make sure when you're making beef stock that you are getting marrow bones. That's how they'll be labeled. So these are filled with marrow, and as this cooks for several hours, the marrow is just going to melt away into the stock, and that's what's going to give it its gelatinous texture in order for you to be able to create rich soups and thick sauces with. And then also a whole chicken that we're going to actually segment because we only want to use the carcass of it, not the meat or the skin. And also some red wine for your beef stock for the deglazing. And it should be a full-bodied wine like a Cabernet Sauvignon. It doesn't have to be an expensive bottle, but it should be a heartier variety of wine. So let's get started making our beef stock. The first step in making beef stock is we need to roast the marrow bones to give them a nice, rich, dark, golden color before putting them in a stock pot to boil them down. So I'm going to place these in a roasting pan. I'm going to drizzle them with just a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to add some onion and carrots to it. Now remember, when you're adding your vegetables, you're going to add all this right into the pot. The skins are going to impart some extra flavor, and it's also going to help to create more of a rich, delicious looking stock. I'm only going to add the onions and the carrots to start with because they can take quite a bit of roasting and they'll get a really nice flavor out of that. Towards the end of the roasting process, when I put the tomato paste on top of the bones to roast that, I will also add the celery and the garlic. And again, not worrying about peeling the carrots. These are washed, but we're going to use the ends. And we're just going to cut them into some thick pieces. Because this stock is going to cook on the stove for about 6 to 8 hours, these carrots can be in larger pieces. It'll have enough time to render all of the flavor out of them. Into the oven it goes, and we're going to get started prepping for our chicken stock. And so the first part of making the chicken stock is you really just want to use the carcass to make the stock. We don't want any of the skin or the meat. Remove all of the skin from the chicken. And I'm being careful not to cut into any of the meat. And usually when I'm making a chicken stock, just so that I'm not wasting it, I will make dinner that night out of the actual meat of the chicken as the stock is cooking. Chicken stock is different than making soup, right? In soup, you want definitely the carcass, but you usually would always have the meat added into that. And in a stock, you really don't. A stock should be a very mild flavored liquid that you can build upon your flavoring with. And because I do want as much bone in there as possible, I am going to trim out the thigh bone to be able to put in there. And the nice part about doing this is that if you do remove this bone, you can actually stuff this piece of chicken with some stuffing. So this bone is actually going to go into my stock. And I'm going to leave the skin on for these thighs, just trim a little bit. And this can actually be stuffed with some stuffing, and that makes a delicious meal the night that your chicken stock is cooking. And then the rest of the skin we're going to take off of the chicken. The skin contains a lot of impurities that you don't want in your stock. What you're really trying to get is not the fat, but the collagen that's in the bones. Okay, so now we've got the chicken carcass. We're going to set that right in the middle of our stock pot. And we are also going to add our onions, and I'm going to add some shallots to it. Because chicken only takes about 4 to 6 hours to complete, you want to cut your vegetables a little bit smaller in order to render out all of the flavor out of them. And the amount of carrots and celery should equal, combined, the amount of onion that you have in there. So to this, we're going to add 2 carrots and 2 stalks of celery and that. And I'm going to add some garlic to mine. Again, I'm going to add the skin and everything. Just peel off some pieces of garlic. I'm going to add some tops to some leeks because I'm going to use these leeks in my chicken for my chicken dish for dinner. Some parsley. We're going to want some fresh thyme and also a bay leaf. So with all that in there, we're going to fill this up to about a little more than 3/4 of the way with water. We're going to set that on the stove to simmer for about 6 to 8 hours. And it should simmer at a very, very low temperature. So it should only lightly bubble, not boil. This is a very slow process. Okay, so now we're going to prepare our vegetable stock. Again, this is only going to cook for about 3 to 4 hours at the most, because we're only cooking down vegetables. So I tend to cut these vegetables even smaller in order to be able to render out the most amount of flavor out of them. So I'm going to add some leek, some onion, and some shallots to it. You don't have to add all of that. It can just be onion. But I like to flavor that all the different onions impart in my vegetable stock. This is the easiest stock to make, probably the quickest one, but it's really good to have vegetable stock on hand. I like to make my risottos with a vegetable stock. I find it to be much lighter and a lot less chickeny tasting. And again, we're going to use the skin and all. The skin's going to give it a nice golden color when it boils. We are going to add some mushrooms to it. The mushrooms are going to give it a nice, deep, warm, earthy flavor. I'm going to put 2 carrots in it. You don't want to go too heavy with the carrots because you don't want it to be super sweet tasting. The carrots are going to impart a very sweet flavor. I will do 2 stalks of celery. We are going to put in some whole garlic cloves along with the skin. A bunch of fresh thyme, a hearty amount of parsley, and 2 bay leaves. We are going to set our pot on the stove and get this to start to simmer. You can see the chicken stock is simmering on the stove at this point. It is a very, very light, low simmer. This is not a fast cooking process. This is a very slow cooking process. So you really don't want it simmering anything more than a few bubbles bubbling up around the pot, and that is it. Anything more than that, you're cooking it too quickly. It takes a very long, slow process to render out all of that collagen out of the bones and the flavoring. As your chicken stock is simmering, you're going to notice a lot of white impurities coming up on the top of the stock pot. And every so often, you just want to take a ladle and very lightly skim that off. You want to let your chicken stock simmer along with your vegetable stock, and when we get to that point, along with your beef stock, uncovered. You do not want to cover these when you're simmering them. You want to allow the liquid to reduce down. We're going to now check on our beef stock. These bones are really starting to brown up nicely. I'm just going to flip them over. You can also see it's starting to caramelize on the bottom of the pan. You don't want to char the bones. You want to make sure they're really nice and caramelized. So if you find that they might be overcooking, just turn your oven down a little bit. I like to start roasting these on 400 degrees, but sometimes I have to turn it down midway through just so that they don't burn. So these are about halfway through the process of caramelizing. And at this stage, we're going to go ahead and add the tomato paste and the garlic and the celery, and it's probably going to roast for about another 20 minutes till it gets really nice and caramelized, and then we're going to end up deglazing it. And you can see how beautiful, see the marrow, it's all breaking apart and rendering down. That's what's going to give this beef stock a tremendous amount of flavor. And so we're just going to smear on some tomato paste. I'm going to add the rest of the vegetables. They're going to get a little bit of a roast in the oven, and then for about another 20 minutes we'll deglaze this, and then we will add it to our stock pot. I'm going to scoop these out and put them in our pot, and then we're going to deglaze this pan with some red wine. You just want to scrape the bottom of all the bits, all that great flavor that's in there. Got everything deglazed off the bottom. The wine will reduce as we cook it down in the pot. And we're going to put this in the sink. It's always best to pour things out in the sink. This way if it drops, it's not going on your floor. Look how nice and rich that looks. And so I'm going to add some of our scraps to this because I don't want to waste them. I don't want to put too many in though. I also add some black peppercorns to my beef stock to give it a little bit of a spicy flavor. Some fresh thyme, some fresh parsley, and some tap water. We're all set to strain our vegetable stock and cool it down. It's very important when you're making stocks that you have a bowl set inside of another bowl with ice around it. That's going to help cool the stock down very quickly. And you just want to place a strainer. I line mine with paper towels. You can do cheesecloth, but paper towels are handy and it works just as well. But you want to strain all of everything out of the stock so that all that you have left is just the liquid. And so you're very carefully just going to pour this in. I want to extract as much of that juice as I can. And this is the same way that you will strain the chicken stock and the beef stock when it finishes. And you want to use your paper towel to actually push out the juices. And look at the nice, beautiful caramel color that we've achieved with our vegetable stock. Your cooled stock is going to be very gelatinous, so it's going to be liquidy, but it's going to have a gelatinous feeling to it. That's from all the gelatin that's in the bones. And the first thing that you want to do is skim off all this fat. You don't want to keep any of that in your stock. And if you swirl your spoon in the middle of the stock very lightly, it'll push all of the fat out to the edge that you can scoop it out. We're going to do the same with the chicken stock. Just carefully peel this off. And you can see how gelatinous this chicken stock is. It's a nice, dark, rich chicken stock. Very mild in flavor, but very flavorful. So to package these, I like to do two different things. I like to put them in ice cube trays because it really helps when you just need to pop one out to make a quick sauce and you're not wasting a whole container of chicken stock. And the other one is these disposable ice cream containers or soup containers. These are a 1 cup measure, so it's perfect for when you're doing recipes and it calls for 1 or 2 cups of chicken stock or beef stock. You can just pull 1 or 2 of these out of the freezer and thaw them, and you have it already pre-measured for you. So we're going to continue to fill our ice cube trays and our containers with our stock and get those into the freezer. It does not take a lot of effort to make stocks. It takes a little bit of time. It can let them simmer all day long as you're working around the house and even through eating dinner, so that by the time the evening comes, they're ready to be strained and refrigerated. It's a great way for you to not have to buy store-bought stocks all of the time, and with just a little bit of effort, your dishes will come out tremendously well as well. Thanks for joining me, and we will see you at the Q&A.